So I was, well, first let me make one comment. I appreciate good marketing, and the Chicago Innovation guys are incredible at it. But if you start a company and sell it for $1 billion or it's worth $1 billion, that doesn't mean you get $1 billion. So let's just be clear on that. And one of the things I'm most proud of with CleverSafe was I was able to put equity in the hands of a lot of great people. You know, a lot of incredible engineers and salespeople and business executives. And the challenge I've had for them is, you're up next. What are you going to do with this wonderful, thing that we've created? And that's true for our investors as well. So as you're building a company, that's one of the things you want to think about, is what will that legacy be? And that's actually one of the things I'm most proud of. So I was trying to think of how to phrase my comments in an interesting way. And we were just talking, as I was sitting down, about a hobby that I have called adventure racing. And it's basically a sport. And it's finding your way in unfamiliar territory as fast as possible. And my wife does not at all understand why I do this on purpose. But it's basically a race that you usually do with a team. And at the beginning of the race, you get a map, and the map has locations that you have to find. And these controls are like an empty milk carton hanging on a tree in the middle of a swamp, okay? And the next one will be, another milk carton hanging on a tree in the middle of a thorn field that goes on for half a mile. And on and on and on. So you have a whole 8, 10, 12, 24 hours, multiple days of this, depending upon the race. And it's a challenge. But for me, for whatever reason, I think that's a lot of fun. And so what I found in my career is that, the kind of persistence, the desire to really overcome tough challenges with a team and figure out where you are and where you're going, and that's kind of, to a great degree, what my journey has been like. The first big company I started was a company here in Chicago called Cruise Technologies. And I thought the way that you make a really good company is you find the technically hardest problem to solve, and you solve that. But what I didn't understand is that doesn't matter if the market doesn't want to buy it. And essentially what we built were wireless tablet computers in the 90s, and that was bad. And we were so far ahead of our time that customers didn't have internet. And we were trying to sell them routers, so they could use this thing. They didn't have wireless, so we made wireless gateways. If you're selling that as accessories to try to get people to buy your product, you're not in a good time. We were 2 decades early, and so that was not ideal. But it was a good learning experience. So the next company I started was Music Now. And Music Now, I would assert, was one of the most historically challenged companies ever. We executed on everything we could do, some of which was considered impossible, and we proved it was not a great business. So Music Now is a company that we were the dominant business-to-business supplier of digital music services, kind of in the pre-iTunes era. Everyone's music service, Best Buy, Clear Channel, Charter, Microsoft. Behind the scenes of all those was us. We licensed all music. We architected the legal approach to digital content licensing that now everyone uses. We built all the technology. We had all the distribution in the world. And like I said, without a doubt, we proved it was not a good business. On the supply side, we had exclusive suppliers. So if you want Bruce Springsteen, you're going to go visit Al Smith at Sony Music. And Al doesn't even have email. Okay? And you're going to try to explain to him that people are going to play music on computers. He doesn't get that, right? And on and on and on. And literally, we had to aggregate, Yoko Ono is involved in, can we get the rights to, it was crazy. But we did it, but we had unwilling suppliers. They made it as hard as possible for us to distribute their goods and pay them. And while we were doing this, along came Napster, along came Kazaa. And even then, they were still not willing to embrace us as the legitimate giving them money supplier, and made it incredibly difficult. On the demand side, when you're in high school and you read about capitalism, Even a libertarian will tell you that a government needs to enforce property rights in order for commerce to exist. We experience that reality that in our market, we didn't have enforcement of property rights on the demand side because the alternative to paid licensed services was unlimited free unlicensed content, Napster. Now, the Supreme Court did rule unanimously that that was illegal literally 8 years later, right? So that didn't help. But what we learned from those things were if you go about things in a certain way, you conduct yourself, hardworking, honest, you're really trying to do the right thing, that even if those don't work out, we had a reunion, a Music Now reunion a couple years ago, the first one ever, like 10 years later, and everyone said that was the best place they ever worked because we had a blast. There were 13 times we had less than a payroll of cash, and we found a way. But like people were having a blast because we just went about it in a certain way. So those things really help with CleverSafe. And one of the challenges for CleverSafe, everybody thinks, oh, this is awesome, look what happened. But, we went 6 years before we actually had a real customer. And we had like 30 people on average. Try running a company with 30 people for 6 years and no revenue. And part of the challenge for CleverSafe was the technology that the whole world had been using for large-scale data storage is a method that hadn't changed in 50 years. And it had the property that the more you stored, the worse the system got. It got a little bit less reliable, a little bit less secure, a little bit slower, a little bit less cost-efficient. And as storage was growing 10 times every few years, it was totally out of gas. And we saw that. And so it's getting worse and worse. And we developed a whole nother method that had the property that we got better and better as the system got bigger and bigger. And so it was going to cross over. The problem we had was that meant our first customers had to be the largest customers in the world. And we're selling not this little toaster or blender or refrigerator that they put in the snack room. We're selling them the back-end storage of everything in the whole enterprise. And these are enterprises doing things like national security, the banking system, enterprises whose value is hundreds of billions of dollars. And we're saying, okay, this is totally different technology that no one uses from a totally new company you've never heard of, but we want to bet you to bet your entire enterprise on it. So that was a challenge. But it had the effect that the hardest customer to get was the first one, and then it got easier, and then it got easier, and then it got easier. So that's what we got to experience at CleverSafe, and kind of the tenacity to get through that, was stuff I learned at those prior businesses and learned from adventure racing. Thank you.